What is going on, y'all? KM Best here, your favorite 69th ranked Marvel snapper, and I would like to talk to you about the announced reversion of Mobius M. Mobius. So this is the announcement posted in the Marvel Snap Discord, the official Marvel Snap Discord, about Mobius being changed. And I want to note two things about this announcement. First, it is very abnormal that they announce anything in the OTA other than on the day of the OTA. The reason I believe that this happened is a bundle featuring She-Hulk is about to go on sale. Now, there have been plenty of conspiracy theories about how the reason Mobius was nerfed was because this She-Hulk bundle was coming out. To my mind, I think it is good that they got this out there before the She-Hulk bundle went on sale, because there is already too much of a perception that players are being milked for money and that balance and monetization are overlapping in unpleasant ways. The Darkhawk bundle with 3x value became a meme basically specifically to point at this overlap between monetization and balance, and I think if they were not to disclose that they were going to buff Mobius again, and a bunch of people bought She-Hulk expecting her to be good, Mobius comes back, they would be rightfully angry with Second Dinner for not telling them that Mobius was coming. So for this reason, I do think it is a very good thing that they announced it early. It is a very good thing they announced it before the She-Hulk bundle, but there's still a lot to unpack here. Now, the main change that's going to happen is Mobius's old effect is coming back into the game, and instead of the complete obliteration that they did to him, they are making him a 3-3 as opposed to the 2-3 that he was. There have been some complaints about whether or not this card is even necessary to bring back into the game. One of the most common sentiments that I've seen is that Mobius, at his current ability, kind of doesn't do anything, and that when they nerfed the card, it was an overreaction in order to allow decks like Sarah, decks like Mr. Negative, decks like Zabu to thrive. And I think there is a little bit of this puzzle that we as endgame players might not be seeing, which is Mobius as a 3,000 token card was very easily acquirable early in the collection track. And a lot of the things that a Pool 3 gamer gets to build around are things that rely on cost reduction, like Sarah and Mr. Negative, or, Beast, right? And so the way he affects the early game of Marvel Snap, or perhaps you would call it the mid-game transition into late game, when you're moving from Series 3 and collecting some Series 4 and 5 cards, but you don't have all of them yet, is actually a big problem. And some of the answers that the Second Dinner devs have given indicate that that seems to be what's going on the back end. They released Mobius, they saw that he absolutely killed Mr. Negative and he absolutely killed Sarah, and so they locked in the change that turned him into what you see. And then after locking in that change, they were in a situation where they saw the numbers sort of start to equalize out, but it was too late, right? It was too late. You can see there are multiple responses where Glenn Jones, the lead development guy on Second Dinner, talks about how if he could go back in time, he wouldn't have nerfed Mobius into the form you see him there right now. So it is good that they are announcing that they're going to, look, we made a mistake. We over-nerfed him. We're going to bring him back. That's good. Now, I do want to talk about the effect he has on cards like Mr. Negative and Sarah. Mr. Negative is not a deck that you'll often catch me recommending. It's usually something that's like a throw-in at the end of my best decks to play as a representation of the devoted fan base that the card has. It's a very specific type of deck, and a very specific type of player will love playing it, but when you look at the numbers it has right now, it's not like Mr. Negative is thriving in the absence of Mobius. It's like a little bit more playable. There's a lot of negative win rate and positive cube rate iterations on it. You can see those right next to me. But it's not like the deck is going to be like Omega dead when Mobius comes back. Even with 2-3 Mobius, I think he was unplayable, but that was when that card could go everywhere. 3-3 Mobius, you need a very specific reason to play. 2-3 Mobius, I get that had a bad effect on Mr. Negative. I just don't think a 3-3 Mobius is going to have that same level of effect. And even if it did, we're talking about a deck that's like the 12th best deck in the game becoming like the 20th best deck in the game. It's even worse for the traditional style of Sarah lists, which are just actively terrible right now, even with Mobius completely out of the metagame. This is just not the kind of deck you can play anymore. the numbers on these kind of decks are extremely bad. Like, if you're a negative fanboy, you can at least look at me and be like, all right, look, we may have a negative win rate, but we have a positive cube rate, and if Mobius comes back in the meta in force, then that's actually going to be bad. But if you're like talking about how this is forcing Sarah out of the metagame, I have news for you. It's not 2022 anymore. Sarah's been out of the metagame. There are other archetypes that people like to think Mobius kills off as well. Things like Destroy because of the ability to not play Death, or Discard because of how it affects the Swarm. But both of those decks were extremely playable when Mobius was here as a 2-3. So I don't really think him coming back as a 3-3 is going to kill those decks. Destroy especially is like a deck that is very built to ruin a Mobius's life with a Lady Deathstrike. Like, sometimes I don't even understand what the discourse is about. The only decks that I think are really getting hurt by this, I think Mr. Negative gets a lot weaker just by the card existing. You end up not wanting to play it as much, but you already kind of didn't want to play it very much. Sarah was already dead. Destroy was good last time Mobius was around. Like, during the Thanos Mobius meta, people were playing Destroy and it was good. And Discard was also around in like relative tier 2 status. People were doing that too. So I don't really get the idea that like people are like, oh, Mobius, he kills all the fun in the game. And it's like, I don't even think that's true. It's just like there's a very loud contingent of people who only play Mr. Negative that really, really hate him. So the question then comes like, all right, well, why revert Mobius at all if the stuff that he hits is actually not that good? And it's because we haven't talked about Loki yet. Now, Mobius, in my opinion, should be a card similar to Cosmo, similar to Killmonger, similar to Shang-Chi, where it exists as a safety valve. So if something gets too overpowering, then you can put this card in your deck and it will be fine again. The issue is current Mobius doesn't do that. You cannot use him effectively against the best discounter card, which is Loki. 3-3 old Mobius kind of does, but he doesn't actually have a lot of easy spots to go in, and that's important. One of the things about 3 cost is that it's a lot less free than 2 cost. At 3 cost, think about a Thanos deck. Thanos wants to be time stoning on 3. A Darkhawk deck wants to be playing Rock Slide on 3, or Zabu into Iron Lad on 3. These are decks that genuinely will have to make a sacrifice in order to include this new Mobius as a 3 cost card. A lot of people are going to talk about Surfer. Surfer, I think, is a great place for Mobius to end up, but it's not even necessarily going to be the best option in Surfer because, what, is Surfer losing to Loki all of a sudden? I actually think Surfer is one of the decks that's like relatively well positioned against it already. Why do you need the extra tech when it'll just make you lose other matchups? And I think this is a good spot for Mobius to end up because when I think about decks I want to play a 3-3 old Mobius in, I can't come up with any. 3 cost is a harder inclusion than 2 cost. It's very easy to get a 2-3 Mobius into your deck, just play him out on turn 2 and then not think about it anymore, because that's like basically a free turn in a lot of different decks. Now, there's also another dynamic that's worth talking about, and that is that Mobius as a 2-3 was too strong with Elsa Bloodstone. Because Elsa Bloodstone just wanted you to play bodies. You play any cheap card in any Elsa deck, so obviously you pick the cheap cards that can get you free wins, Mobius, Luke Cage, etc. Elsa's been nerfed now, and I think a lot of Mobius's ubiquity was down to the fact that he was one of the best 2-cost cards in the game, and now he will not be one of the best 3-cost cards in the game. The fundamental issue with old Mobius was that he was too free of an include everywhere that he went. That is the problem that he had. And I think moving him up to 3 cost does solve that issue. However, I do think he's a card they're going to need to keep an eye on. This is the kind of card that could get kind of annoying. Maybe you make him a 3-2 later on down the line. I think that's fine as well. So overall, from a balance perspective, I think that 3-3 Mobius will be the kind of card that you have to pay a cost for, and that is good. He's always needed to be a card like that. Having him at 2-3 was egregiously stupid, in my opinion, especially when you compare him with the other tech cards in his range. I think the most obvious comparison is Luke Cage, who was a power lighter and had a worse effect. So I think it's very clear that at 2-2, I think Mobius would still be a little too strong. 2-1 makes some sense, but bumping him up the energy curve is a much bigger tax on including him in your deck, because it is very hard to want to play a 3/3 when that 3/3 is not incredibly necessary for your game plan to actually be functional. I actually wonder if he won't do a good enough job of keeping Loki in check as a 3/3. That's like a legitimate concern that I have, because I kind of don't know if there's any decks I want to play him in. However, that was only half of the issue with the Mobius nerf. The rest of the issue was that they completely obliterated a card that people paid for and then said, more or less, that they kind of expected that to happen. I still need an explanation for that. Like, that is fundamentally something I need an explanation for, period. I would like to know how that happened. I would like to know all the series of decisions that led up to that statement. And then I would like to know that they will never happen again. Because, full disclosure here, I have never been closer to quitting the game than I was after that statement came out. Like, this week, basically. Because I am someone who takes, like, whatever relative ethical concerns that I have fairly seriously. If I am making a video about how Marvel Snap's newest card is super awesome, right? And then I make a video about how that awesome card needs to get nerfed because it's too strong. Those two things can be correct, but at the same time, I'm participating in a cycle that involves people spending money and then not getting what they paid for. Because when I talk about whether or not you should buy a card, I am talking about in the context of winning games. Like, for example, I definitely think you should buy Werewolf by Night. He's really, really strong. He's really, really good. But what happens if they nerf him? And what happens if he was intentionally released too strong so that they could nerf him later after you've already paid for him? And that is the kind of thing that just like really rubs me the wrong way. It is the thing that I think is the actual biggest problem with what they did to Mobius, the one you see on my screen right now. And it's why I'm extremely happy that they reverted it, because when you delete the effect of a card, like, I think we could all agree, if this was the original change they made, I don't think anyone would have a problem with it. I think everyone would be fine. They'd be like, yeah, 3/3, you know what? That's fair. He's undercosted. I totally get it. But the way in which it was arrived at is frustrating to me, genuinely. It's extremely frustrating to me. And I would like to know, I guess there are two things that I really want to know. The first is, can they just be like, we will never do this again? Like, we'll aim high on these card releases because we want them to be good, but we're not going to like explicitly push them. Like, some of them are going to be too strong. That's the nature of the beast. Like, that's what happens when you make cards, but we're not doing it on purpose. And I need them to like actually say that. I know it sounds stupid, but I do need them to say that. And I think secondarily, I will say that them releasing the statement on Mobius before the She-Hulk bundle came out does go a long way with me. I think that is really, really good that they released the statement on Mobius before the She-Hulk bundle came out, because we don't want people buying stuff that is then going to be in a different environment almost immediately, especially if they know about the different environment. So we definitely, they get some points for that, basically. My read on what happened is almost immaterial, but it's basically like, I think they got some really bad numbers on the back end, and they were like, oh my God, we have to do something about this guy. And then when they went to write the write-up, they didn't want to say, okay, he totally like murdered Sarah or whatever, right? Like, I did not expect him to murder Sarah or whatever. They didn't want to say that. And so instead they were like, he released a little too strong and we were worried that he was too strong, and so we had to nerf him. But I am hopeful, I think more hopeful than I was when I made my first video on this topic, because I genuinely want to believe that this was an accident, or at least that this was the kind of thing that happens in the process of game design, and their original statement on the matter didn't leave a lot for me to believe in, if that makes any sense. It was very tough to read that, especially after making videos about like, yo, Mobius is awesome, go buy Mobius, you need to buy Mobius for this, who's the safest 3,000 token, buy Mobius, oh, okay. It made me feel like I was complicit in that. And I don't like that. And I'm really hoping that whatever they do say about this, it satisfies those concerns, because I am definitely, I'm definitely worried about it. I'm happy they did this. I'm happy they did the show of faith by letting us know before the She-Hulk bundle came out that this is what was going to happen. I'm optimistic, but there are still some concerns that I have. And in addition to the concerns about Mobius, I would say there are also some concerns about, like, why is it always season pass cards? One of the things that I thought about recently was you have Mobius, or you have Elsa, you have Loki, you have Hitmonkey, you have Wave, you have Zabu, you have Surfer, and those are 6 of probably the 10 strongest cards to ever exist in Marvel Snap, and they're all from the Season Pass. And I guess I wonder if they're doing something differently on the Season Pass where it's like, it leads to this, because I know they've said specifically that they aim high on the Season Pass. My guess is I would say just like, hey, maybe don't do that anymore. Like, maybe aim for flavorful instead of aiming high on the Season Pass, because I feel like this is, you know, like too many. You know what I mean? If there weren't Elsa and Loki back to back, I probably wouldn't feel that way, but I kind of do feel that way, because like 6 of the 10 strongest cards in the history of Marvel Snap coming off of the Season Pass is like, pump the brakes a little bit. Something might be wrong with the process here. So I'd like to know about that as well. Of course, as always, let me know what you think about this situation in the comments. I still read every single one of them, and I really appreciate everyone who's sticking with me and just getting this far in the video and all that kind of stuff. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much. Let me know what you think. I don't even know if I covered everything that could be covered about this, because there's honestly so many angles to approach this from, but I felt like I needed to just sort of get this off my chest and talk about what this means. So I hope you enjoyed that. As always, thank you so much. I have been KM Best. I will see you in the next one.